All right. Let me bring up the comments so I can see people. I can't find it. Did it post?
What are you looking for?
His post.
I got it. Sure did.
In nerds.
There we go. Post. All right, I shared it in there.
Facebook just screwed with everything. Oh, there we go.
Said no.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Everything. Oh, there we go. All right. I have to mute that. That's annoying.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I have it playing and it was.
Oh, you
No,
could hear it as well, so you were hearing yourself
Yeah.
twice. Yeah.
Yeah. It was gonna freak me out for a second. Okay. Why is this not? And there we go. Facebook screwed everything up, so now you can't do like most recent. It's by however you do it.
By popularity, usually.
Yeah, it's by popularity and who comments and all this other stuff, so it's super annoying. All right. Oh. We're here for our second There's a novel with David Annandale, the author of some Warhammer books. I want to say this right, so don't get mad at me because I had to Google a lot of stuff in this book. It's the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Neferata. Is that how you say it?
That's right.
Mortarch of Blood.
Got it right.
Okay. Layer on it. It's so terrible. It was my first Warhammer book ever, and it was really good. We'll get to that, but what's you've written how many Warhammer books, both 40K and Sigmar?
And then Horus Heresy on top of that.
Yes.
That's a good question. I think about 22 now. I think they're about 22 out, and I've just turned in. They think the 23rd.
Oh wow!
So give or take.
What got you started with Warhammer? Why Warhammer? Why? Because you've written 40K, the Horus Heresy, and the Sigmar, which are three completely different. I don't even know if it's genres within Warhammer or how would you describe it?
Well, there are two primary lines. Age of Sigmar, which replaced Warhammer Fantasy, which is also the fantasy line, and then Warhammer 40,000, which is the science fiction line.
Okay.
And the Horus Heresy is kind of part of that line, but you could call it almost Warhammer 30K. It takes place 10,000 years earlier and it's about the galactic civil war that created the situation that we now have in Warhammer. It takes place 10,000 years earlier and it's about the galactic civil war that created the situation that we now have. It keeps getting an echo here. Earlier.
That's why I'm using the headphones.
Okay.
Yeah. I turned it off. My computer started freaking out on me, and I was like, "What's going on?"
And they all come actually. Though one is essentially fantasy and the other is essentially science fiction. They also have fusions of genres, right? In fact, starting in 2019, there's going to be Warhammer Horror, which will have stories in both the Age of Sigmar and the 40K line, but will be full-on horror tales. Ooh. So that was one of the things that attracted me to the Warhammer universes in the first place, and it was with Warhammer 40K that I've done the bulk of my work. It's in the last couple of years that I've really started to do a fair bit more now in Age of Sigmar, and it was this the way that it was a fusion of all the genres that I love in one place. So there's science fiction and kind of Lovecraftian cosmic horror and space opera and military fiction, and I mean, you can do just about anything in them. And you'll be seeing some more in some of the other lines with you can do heists, and there's even Dan Abnett has a one of his Eisenhorn books. There's basically a kind of Murder on the Orient Express train adventure segment of the story. So you can do just about anything, but the primary fusion of genres was what really drew me to the universe.
What's which one would be your favorite? Not necessarily favorite, but probably favorite, because they're all very detailed. There's a lot of history.
Yeah. I've had a bit of an advantage. Oh, sorry, what was that?
No, go ahead.
Well, I've had a bit of an advantage with the Age of Sigmar, since that's quite new. It replaced Warhammer Fantasy just a couple of years ago, and I hadn't written for Warhammer Fantasy, so I was coming in on the ground floor with Age of Sigmar, and there was a fair bit of, though there are characters that certainly have transferred from one to the other, there's a bit of a blank slate quality as well, so that made it easier for me coming on board. I don't know that I have a favorite, quite honestly. I certainly, Warhammer 40K is what I am most familiar with, simply for having worked in it the most. But now I find myself kind of splitting my time almost equally between the two lines.
Okay.
And that keeps it really fresh for me as a writer, sort of jumping back and forth between fantasy and science fiction, and with very different worlds to play in, so that there's no chance I'm going to get bored, because if the next time I turn around, I'm going to be in something completely different. So they each have their joys.
Yeah. I can say that somebody who knew absolutely nothing about Warhammer coming into this, absolutely nothing. I got a crash course by Tim and Mike and a couple other people, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different timelines. There's a lot of different plot lines. There's a lot of different characters. Why Neferata? Because, and we'll explain the book in a minute, but why her? Why the choice on her?
Well, the short answer for that is that my editor asked me if I would write a Neferata book, right? But the funny thing is, I had just been about to get in touch with him to say that up until Neferata, I hadn't written anything other than a few short stories for the Age of Sigmar.
Okay.
And I was just thinking that I would like to tackle a book-length adventure. And so I was just going to get in touch with him about that when he got in touch with me saying, would you like to write an Age of Sigmar book, and would you like to do Neferata? And if there had been one character that I could have picked from all of them to write, it would have been her. Just this kind of delicious this Machiavellian power, who's always, you think she's 5 steps in front of you, but really she's 10.
Yes.
There's and just there's this kind of sort of unapologetic darkness. I mean, she's going to be doing all kinds of nasty stuff, but she's not going to feel bad about it, right? But I think that in some ways we can help make her an attractive character, at least to me. So she would have been who I would have picked to write for Age of Sigmar. So my wife practically had to peel me off the ceiling when found out who I was going to write. And the brief that I was given for the series was something like, if I could produce something like House of Cards meets Crimson Peak by way of Excalibur. And that was a tall order, and I don't know if I've met that challenge, but it's one that I'm eager to keep tackling.
Well, yeah, I'll introduce everybody to the book, because I can say that I like her character, but I don't it's hard to like her character, but she's written very well, and she's very Machiavellian, and you definitely pulled off everything you described, because while reading it, you think that she doesn't know what's going on, or that she does know what's going on, but she has spies, and the reason why she knows what's going on is because of her spies. But when in reality, it's almost like you're playing chess against the chess master, and she's the chess master, and she already dictated how the game's going to be played. And she already knew how she was going to play you.
Yeah, in some way, she also told you what your moves were going to be.
Exactly. I really enjoyed it, especially for my first Warhammer book. I mean, it's vampires. Who doesn't? Not everybody likes vampires, but I mean, it's not the vampires that people have been reading about in the last couple of years. That's for sure. It's very bloodlust and gory, and your descriptions of pretty much everything was like I was there. I could picture it in my mind, and I could visually see everything going on. It was very intense in some spots, and the dual timeline, it kind of threw me off at first. I had to reread the first 2 chapters, and kind of because I wasn't prepared for it. But then when I went back and reread the first 2 chapters, it was it made more sense. And so I'm trying to place the timeline.
Yeah. Well, and I think, especially for someone completely new to Warhammer, that double timeline thing would probably present a challenge. So I'm glad you enjoyed it all the same, because the jumping back and forth there between the Age of Myth and the Age of Sigmar is sort of the 2 ages that one had been finished in a relatively recent past, but it's kind of tied in with the way this new universe has been established. And the purpose of this book was, in many ways, to kind of set Neferata up in the Age of Sigmar. Then sort of the ground level for a trilogy of books and longer books. So kind of getting her all set up for that. And so that's one of the reasons why there was some flashing back to earlier things. And the situation that she finds herself in at the beginning of this book and in the Age of Sigmar sections picks up on the events in previous novels written by other people. So there's a lot of continuity threads that are kind of coming into play here.
That's what I was going to ask, because I'm trying to, having to go back and forth and having to stop. I had to look up the Blood God, and I had to look up, Chaos and his different gods that served under him, and then of course the people who served under them, and it's like a continuous list of people that I was constantly looking up. But the detail is amazing, and I can say that so the one question I had was the Season of Loss, because there's 2 seasons, the Season of Loss and the Seasons of Crematory. The Season of Loss is before the Age of Sigmar, correct?
No, those are just like the seasons of the year.
Okay.
It's just the time of year.
Okay, so what is the time frame between those 2? Because that's
there's between the 2 ages, you're looking at hundreds of years.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because there's ancestors. Because I really liked the end, and I'll explain to people why. But you can tell because she talks about her ancestors, and she's working to fix the betrayal of her ancestors. This character, and the one who is very crucial to Neferata's plan the entire time. And she speaks of her ancestors, so I figured it was a couple hundred years, because it's speaking of that event. But I will say the description of her is his name Nagadron? Is that how you say it?
Nagash? Yeah, Nagadron. Yeah, her. Sorry,
the dragon-like, the dragon-like thing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed her as a character, and I'm not supposed to. And after reading the book, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to, because it's not really a book about. There's really no good ending. It's not a feel like. There's not a feel good part of the book. There's no happy ending, so to speak.
No, unless you're Neferata, as far as she's
Yeah, I
concerned.
mean, unless you're her, then everything's good, and you just, basically leveled an entire city, which she did. But I don't know if that was, and that's what I finished the book, and I was just wondering, like, am I supposed to like her? And not necessarily like her, but I kind of understood her reasoning for everything she did, and it leaves you wondering, like, okay, well, that's just weird. Like, she's a very powerful character.
Yeah, and she is nasty, and I think that, I mean, I would like the reader to wind up in much the situation that you described, in that she is also, because she's your protagonist, and we kind of default to sympathizing with whoever our primary character is going to be, even if we, in many ways, we shouldn't. But she's one of these characters that, because she is smarter than everybody else, and because she is the center of the narrative, we're probably going to side with her. Even though, but I wanted the reader to feel a little uneasy about that, as you kind of do realize what she's doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to give you some other characters who are perhaps genuinely moral characters, who ultimately don't stand a chance against her. But so that you have these other places where your sympathy might go, even though sooner or later you know that, yeah, that's not going to turn out well for these people.
Yes, the firstborns, and you almost you're sympathetic to their battle and them trying to end her in every way possible, and then all the houses coming together to fight her, and even vampire houses coming together to fight her, because they're all, she is all powerful, and she controls everything. And it's when she and her, like, her power, you think that is it Helizan or Helzin?
Helizan?
Helizan? Okay, so the House of Helizan. You think that they somehow have a chance, like, and you hope, like, you have that hope that they will defeat her, and like, they do end up winning, and you hope that all these people came together and they do end up, when in reality, at that point, when they fight and she sees him, he's been playing the game all along. And it's almost soul crushing as a reader when she feeds on him and he realizes that she knew the entire time, and that she played him exactly the way she wanted to. And it was like, I had to pause for a second, because it was very soul crushing. Like,
oh, good. That was the plan.
Okay, well, you succeeded, because you're kind of like, well, damn. Like,
the thing is, I mean, I'm glad you said that you sort of were hoping that maybe they were going to succeed, because, when you think about it, since all that stuff is taking place hundreds of years before the Age of Sigmar, you know it's going to fail, right? But if you can just forget for a few moments that maybe it won't, then then hooray! That's what I'm pleased.
Yeah. And then the battle, I'll have to say, the introduction to the Age of Sigmar was very in your face. It was bloodshed, and it was brutal, and it was powerful, and it was treacherous. I mean, but the ending really threw me. When what is her name? I can't pronounce her name very well. Is it Desena?
And of course, you're relying on my faulty memory.
It's the vampire who she was loyal to Neferata the entire time.
Right. Yeah. And this is the problem when you write. I'm trying to remember a character from a book I wrote a couple of years ago, and so your memory is going to be better than mine. But I think I know who you mean. I'm just trying to remember how I spelt it.
It's Dessina.
Desina. Yeah, Desina.
Desina. Okay. Like, you really wrote her. She really threw me for a loop. Because she was, you could feel her hatred, but the entire time it was all fake. And it wasn't really hatred, it was hatred for other stuff. For her family. For the betrayal of her family. That's what the hatred was for. And that was a great ending. Like that. And then, she destroys her whole city, but
Well, part of it anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
just so she can get it back.
Yeah. And her whole motto, all the blood is mine. And like and that's throughout the whole book. That's all you see. Like when I was when I was thinking about what you were writing and envisioning myself in the book, everything's red all the time.
Well, the wonderful cover that they was given to the book certainly helps with that, right? The very pervasively red book.
Mm-hmm.
So well, good.
Yeah,
glad to hear that too.
Yeah, it's definitely. Your descriptions were just amazing. Especially with Nagadron. Like I could feel the screams coming from his skeleton. Like that was intense. I don't know if I would ever want, I don't know why people would even fight her if she's flying on that thing. It's this huge, for people who are watching, it's this huge skeletal dragon that's got souls stuck in its rib cage that scream and give him power. That would be enough for me. I'd just run away.
I don't know if you've seen the model that they put out of her riding Nagadron, because it is he is a fairly impressive beast.
Yeah, I haven't seen the model yet. I've been looking at the models of a couple of the characters, and it helps visualize, even though the descriptions were really well done. Looking at the models does help visualize and kind of put them in your brain.
Well, looking at the models helped me describe them too. Right?
Yeah. But they were very well, like, it definitely interested me in reading more.
Oh, good.
And not like, and reading more about her, because I really liked her as a character, even though she's evil, and she is evil, I still liked her because she's very intelligent and, and ruthless. She's absolutely ruthless.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad, because there's at least a couple of at least one short story further that's been out, and more to come. And just the other week, I turned in the first draft of the next novel.
Oh, I'm excited. It's You're welcome, Levi.
So
yes, there's a copy in the house to read. And I'm excited, and it also gave me reason to kind of branch out and read other books about the Age of Sigmar and other characters, and especially when you're researching Chaos and all of his people, and it's just, there's a lot, and I'm still trying to figure all this out. I can't even imagine 40K and how to even deal with that. Like, Tim, that's Tim's realm. That's all Tim.
It's very simple. Think of Catholics in space that dress like Nazis. That's pretty much the easiest way to go about doing it. That's just to scratch the surface.
I know Tim had a couple questions.
Oh yes.
I know he's delving into it. I've been hogging. I really like the book. And it was such a pleasure for you to send it and read it, and it's definitely on a level of one of my favorites to read, just because it's completely different than anything I've read.
Oh, well, thank you.
And it's very bloody. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Oh. So I've compiled a list of questions from a number of people who are fans of yours, and also of the Warhammer and Warhammer 40K I guess fandom would be the only good word to say there. So these are not strictly my questions.
Okay.
There's probably that one question that's mine, and that's will you make my Space Marine cosplay canon? But that's a separate issue.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So my first question is Chaos or Imperium, and why?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, most of the stuff I've written is from the Imperium side, so I guess I understand that best. But given that my first love is horror, that's what I come through to 40K. Any chance I get to unleash as much chaos as possible, I'm going to jump on. So I'm sidestepping the question slightly.
So essentially, you're saying chaos. Okay, so on this topic of horror, your bio mentions your love of horror, but on the surface, it looks as though you mostly write "quote-unquote" good guy protagonists. If Games Workshop let you make a book for mature audiences, and I remember you saying something about Warhammer horror, what horror protagonist would you like to write about? And also, would they even be a protagonist, or would you write them as, say, the antagonist?
Well, that's a really good question. And as far as I have actually also just recently finished a novella for the Warhammer horror line. But there, the protagonist wouldn't be any one of the kind of the named figures, right? They're much more just the poor sods in the background who are getting trampled by the evil. There's a few. There's a few that certainly attract you. Well, at some level, I am writing a similar such figure in Neferata, though there's a great unclean one that I wouldn't mind tackling, and of course his name has gone out of my head this precise second. So having just said, yeah, I want to write this guy, now I can't remember his name. But it's a greater demon that has some interesting possibilities that I wouldn't mind exploring.
Do you do a lot of research before you start writing, and say whilst you're writing? And if so, what do you research?
A lot of the codexes, of course, making sure I've got the most recent ones there and whatever's been up to date. And then depending on the book, there will also be some novels by other writers that will have a direct bearing on what I'm looking at. So that'll come into play. And as well, there will be sometimes texts that have nothing to do with Warhammer or 40K itself, but that are useful to the kinds of themes that I want to explore.
So how do all of the Black Library authors coordinate so that they're not breaking canon when they write something that somebody else wrote about before? So, like, for instance, I saw that you wrote something about the Death World of Pythos during 30K. Yeah. And CZ Dunn also wrote a novel about it known as Pandorax. So how do you guys ensure that there's not going to be differences?
Well, it varies a little bit. In that particular case, I think we might even have written the books around the same time as each other, and neither of us saw the other book until they were published. At least to my Christian might have seen mine since he was still an editor at Black Library at that time, but I didn't see his. So there, though, fortunately, there's 10,000 years between the two versions of the planet, and so any differences can certainly be down to those 10,000 years. In many other instances, fortunately, we have editors who have excellent memories. Though, there's limits to what any human being can do. But it is a pretty good system they have of keeping track of who has done what, where, and especially something that's continuity intensive, like the Horus Heresy. That's truly heroic work on the part of the editors to keep us in line and make sure that we aren't conflicting with each other. And I remember one of the more interesting experiences I had as far as continuity was concerned was when Rob Saunders and I wrote. He wrote. We were doing the Mark of Calth, and so I did the Unburdened, and he did the Honored, and we wrote those books simultaneously from outlines that we each knew what the other person's outline was, and he was doing the story from the perspective of the Ultramarines, and I was doing it from the perspective of the Word Bearers. And for a lot of what I was writing, I knew that we sort of divvied up the scenes that the game touched on, so that gave us a certain degree of flexibility. But then there were scenes where the two came together, and I remember writing combat scenes, thinking, I don't even know if my geography in any way resembles what he's writing. Fortunately, Lori Golding, our editor, he brought this all together, and then he just split it down the middle so that half the scenes were declared canon for me and half were canon for Rob, and then we just revised our respective segments to match the other person's. But I remember mentioning to someone who described the process as like playing ping pong between two moving cars.
I have a quick question. Damien asked, he's looking to get into a new book series, and he doesn't want to just jump into the middle of the storyline, similar to what I just did. What would be a good reference point for him? For 40K, I guess we'll ask for 40K and for the Age of Sigmar because he didn't specify which one, but we'll go with Age of Sigmar first.
Well, there are a couple of a few anthologies now that they're coming out, and they very much have they're meant to be kind of starting points for new readers, and so they actually have "Start Here" written in the upper right corner of the cover. So
okay.
we have one here. Yeah, here we go. Hammer Hall and Other Stories, right? And here's your start here. So. These are collections, so they're anthologies with multiple stories, also often a complete novella or a short novel in them as well. So that would give you a good starting point. And I remember when I first got into this fictional universe, it was through a couple of anthologies where just getting a bunch of short stories felt, it taught me the universe very quickly. And since I mean, there are continuity lines, but there are also lots of standalone novels. So there's a lot of different directions you can go in. I mean, if he's also looking for just a kind of like a self-contained series, there's The Beast Arises, which was a 12-volume series, fairly short novels that takes place in between the Horus Heresy and 40K. So it's pretty self-contained.
Okay. Or you could just jump in like I did,
Yeah, you do that too.
Cannonball straight into
total immersion.
Don't even worry about it. Okay. I don't know if Troy's still watching. But Tim, what was your next one?
I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you believe that there will ever be any opportunity to tell a Lost Primarch story?
I can't answer that question without the Inquisition taking me out.
Well, that was not the answer that I was expecting, but I just figured a flat no would be okay.
Well, yeah, I'll give you
fair enough.
You never know. You never know. I honestly don't. No.
Yeah. Do you ever take inspiration from some tabletop games to write a story? Like there's a game where Death Watch kill teams are engaging some Xenos, like the Emperor Protects, or have you ever been inspired to write anything based on a tabletop battle or video game that you yourself played?
Not directly for 40K. I've in some non-40K fiction, I've sometimes taken some inspiration from some role-playing games that I was running, or sometimes fed some of what I was writing into the role-playing game to see how it then turned out. With regards to 40K and Age of Sigmar, I haven't yet had that particular occasion happen to me, but some of the books or stories that I have written have been drawn direct, have been following very closely, let's say, the narrative set up for those games. Right, so the Unburdened would be the obvious example. The other would be Curse of the Wolfen, where I was essentially novelizing the game book.
Wow. Not sure I could keep track of the game and the book at the same time if it were me trying to do it.
I can't. I know. There's no way. There's so much. There's so much.
Well, it helps with the game books that they're, essentially they read like histories. So, but there was part of the challenge there was because the book was only supposed to be 50,000 words long, but to novelize everything that was in the game book would have required a book probably 2 or 3 times as long. It's a question of picking and choosing, and then since a number of the scenes were already written out in novelistic fashion, how to revisit that scene without doing copy and paste.
Oh, okay.
We've seen quote unquote radical topics in Warhammer literature, such as Primaris modifications to Space Marine genetics. And there was something in one of the Blood Angels novels about like a replicate or cloning Space Marines instead of grooming and training them, like a process that could sort of be a Deus Ex Machina, like a mulligan sort of, but naturally it was removed from the board, so to speak, by having it turn into a chaos plot with specifically the replicate thing. So we've seen that the authors are willing to push the envelope, and this may open some can of worms amongst the anti-SJW crowd, and surely it's been controversial in other forums, but I'm just curious if you would let on whether or not anyone ever floated the idea of female Space Marines in like novel, more than addressing it than just yes, it's not possible because the Emperor says so.
It has. I haven't been part of any discussion, so no one's brought it up with me. They don't have. I got nothing on that. Sorry.
And one more potential eye-rolling question from not another SJW type crowd. What are the chances of a non-cis het or cisgender hetero character, such as the lead protagonist in future writings, something that's like not standard super hero dude runs out of bubble gum, but could generally appeal to underrepresented Games Workshop audience?
Oh, I think that I would say entirely possible, and there's certainly been there's been a concerted effort to increase the representation both on the page and in terms of who's writing the books as well. So that I wouldn't rule it out at all.
Is there anything that you've pitched to Games Workshop that they've said, yeah, no, that's just not ever going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I did at one point pitch a Tyrannid point of view story, and no, that I was informed that was just a little bit too mad.
Could you pitch that to us? Like, how would that go?
Yeah.
I just want to, because, if you know anything about the Tyrannids, they're basically just like mindless killing bugs, except for like maybe gene stealers or whatever. So I'm curious how you would go about doing that.
Yeah, well, I didn't really get a chance to find out, but so it was really still at the embryonic stage. Before I really sort of started writing down thousands of words trying to figure out how sort of a chittering hive mind would sound in words. I thought it at least it was one of these ideas. I thought, well, no, this is never going to fly. But what the hell? I'll try it anyway. And no, it didn't fly. The editor I sent it to quite liked it, but it just was it wasn't going to work. But who knows? I haven't deleted the file.
Someone asked, would you ever be interested in creating your own tabletop game and book series?
Oh wow. Well, I mean, I've done a little bit of work with Alan Barr of Gallant Knight Games, sort of writing some game settings for him, and we've collaborated on a we are collaborating rather on a role playing game. In a fairly minimalist form. So I enjoy that. Like taking on a full like an actual tabletop game like Warhammer 40K is utterly beyond my capabilities. But something smaller scale with in the RPG realm is something that I do enjoy playing around.
The process to become a Warhammer author. How hard is it?
It's the way I got in was through one of their open calls, and every so often they have a call for submissions. They just had another one this past year where they look for writers and look for new writers and are asking for stories often sometimes on a specific theme. So when I came on, there was an open call for it was for the anthology Treacheries of the Space Marines, and they were looking for stories about one of four characters: Araman, Karn, Typhus, and Lucius. And so I sent in a pitch for a story on about Typhus, and they liked my pitch, they liked the story, and that's how I came on board. So I think for most people coming in at these that certainly remains the most open of doors for new writers. I mean, there's some other processes I think sometimes as well with people who are already very well established as writers. But I just went in through one of their periodic open doors.
Oh wow! Okay, lucky.
Yes, very lucky, very lucky.
So this book, Neferata, it took you how long to write?
A couple of months.
Couple of months. Is that about average for most of yours?
Yeah.
Besides the novellas, because those I know are a little bit shorter. So
yeah, I think it averages out to about. I mean, for the full length novels, which are a bit longer than the Neferata one, that works out to about 3 months, roughly speaking.
And that's just writing, and now the research and all that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of factored into it a little bit. So yeah. So generally speaking, you have I think it usually works out to about a 3-month window, 3 or 4 months, depending a little bit.
Okay.
Something like
that. That's fairly quick, and
yeah. There's a.
But it's also because you guys are all working off of each other, so it does help that you guys.
Pardon?
I said you guys are all working off of each other. You guys use each other's books as references and stuff like that. So I guess that would help. It
does, and in some instances when there's very minimal research necessary, that helps even more when you can. So it depends on the assignment, depends on the story, depends on the continuity that's surrounding it to greater or lesser degrees.
Probably your favorite character, and throughout both series, both 40K and.
It often tends to be whoever I've got at the moment. I'd say the ones that I have. I don't know if I could put my finger on one.
Okay.
I have the 3 or 4. So Neferata is one. Commissar Yarrick that I got to write several books about would be another. Castle and Crow of the Grey Knights. I'm just about to start my 3rd book about would be third. So they'd be among my favorites to write.
Okay.
And I also have there's a supporting character that I introduced in The Death of Antagonist, the Canoness Erin Setheno. And she's one of my favorite characters to write. I bring her back in whenever I can.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think Troy had a question, but I don't see him now. So.
What about your favorite character that's not yours, like one that you have not written?
Okay. Yeah, that's tough too, because I can think of so many candidates there. I mean, I do think what Dan Adler gave us in Eisenhorn was marvelous. I love the the now I forget, here's the aging Professor Brain, but the Arendevsky Bowden's series with the Night Lords. There's some truly wonderful characters there. And actually, one of my recent favorite batches was Josh Reynolds in the Lord of Undeath. I'll make sure I've got that title right. 1 second. No, The Undying King. Lord of Undeath is by Clint Warner. In The Undying King, he has the Order of the Fly, a group of knights of Nagash in the Age of Sigmar, and these are, I mean, they're spreading the word of disease, right? They're these plague-ridden, boil festering figures, but who are truly chivalrous. Right, they absolutely feel that they are doing the good work with their spreading of plagues, and they have all kinds of misadventures and a truly delightful bunch. So I'd like to see him write an entire series about these guys. They're enormous
fun. You're still a professor. How do your students react to you being an author for Warhammer? Do they ask questions, or do you spend a lot of time in your classes talking about it?
We don't. I mean, a lot of them don't. A lot of them have no idea that I am a Warhammer writer. So some, it's because it just doesn't come up. Some of them do, and then they'll sometimes ask me about it. But it's the exception rather than the rule. So, for the most part, I don't know what they think of that, if they do at all.
How long have you been teaching?
Well, gosh. Well, I'm just getting my, I've been at the University of Manitoba for 20 years now. But I guess I first set foot into a classroom back in 1992. So, but that was when I was still a grad student. So, but at my current place of employment's been 20 years.
Wow, that's quite a long time.
I'm getting a fancy watch.
Yeah. I taught school and I got a fancy watch. Well, it was a pleasure. Do you have any questions for us? Anything you would like to know?
I'm curious about your book club. Mike sort of gave me a rough idea, but fill me in.
It's new. This is obviously the second episode. We have Drinking Bro Nerds is a collection, because it's just a collection of nerds from everywhere doing for everything. Like there's Warhammer, Star Wars, Star Trek, anime. It's just a plethora of ideas, and a lot of us love books, and we talk about books all the time. People are always asking, what's the next series that everybody's reading? What does everybody recommend? And nerds used to do it a couple years ago, but it kind of just got off track. And then I like to read. I love books. We have a collection of books. Half of our weight when we move for the military is books. So, which tends to be an issue because, when you're told that 2,000 pounds of your weight is books, there's a problem.
Yeah.
We might have an issue with books. But I enjoy it, and I've always wanted to do book clubs, but never really did it. And it was just a way for people to, hey, we're going to have this book. Let's all discuss it. Let's try to get the authors in to get your take, because a lot of times people read books and they can discuss the books between each other, but it's not, what's your intention as the author? What do you want us to feel? Are we feel, is our feeling, how do we feel about the book when we read it? And to also tell you that we appreciate the feeling that we get when we read the book. But the book club was just a way for people to talk about books and talk with authors and get to know them and just put faces to books, you know. It's really just I just love books so much, and it forces me to delve into different genres. Like I never would have picked up a Warhammer book if Mike had not mentioned it to me. Never even thought about it. I've seen it. I've seen people talk about it. Never would have crossed my mind to read it. And now that I read it, I want to read more. There's so many different directions that you can go, and that's what I like about it. And same with my husband. He read the S.A. Corey books when they first started coming out, the Expanse series. I watched the first season of that TV show with him, and now I'm reading the books. And I never would have thought to read those books. And that's kind of what I want people to do with this book club. Pick up a book that you probably never would have read.
Oh, great. That's very cool.
That's the goal. And to get people to, you know, a lot of people are in a comfort zone when it comes to different books.
Yeah.
Try something new.
Yeah. Oh,
you know, and it's also fun talking with authors. It's nice to hear you talk about the books, because then it opens up a different world, in my opinion. So, but yeah, that's kind of what the thought process was behind the book club. I want people to try something different, and I hope that people read this book. It's bloody. There are arms being thrown, and there's chandeliers made from arms, skeleton armies, and all the cool stuff that my daughter's been sitting here now. She was reading a little bit of the book, and she kind of just looked at me like, "What, Mom?" And that's kind of what I want, you know. And now she's interested. She wants to read it.
Good.
But it was a fantastic book. It was definitely. I wasn't prepared for it. I can say that. Like I did some you know, background information online. But reading the book and the visuals that I get in my mind, it was very well. Yes, Mary, I was.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm really grateful for you to joining us. To have you on here and to get to talk to you. And I forced Tim to give me a, you know, rundown of Warhammer, which just caused so much chaos in my mind.
Yeah, because that was such an ordeal for me.
Yeah, it was like, Tim, I need you to help. I need you to teach me Warhammer. And he was like, okay. And then it was just like messages nonstop. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I need a spreadsheet. I did make a spreadsheet. We won't discuss. But yeah, and I'm just super grateful that you came on here, and it would be a pleasure to have you again.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm glad, and I appreciate it. And everybody, Neferata Mortarch of Blood. I highly suggest it. Damien, even you, if you want to just jump, you know, cannonball into the middle of the entire timeline. You'll really like it. Even if you haven't read anything about Warhammer, you'll just like the book solely on the visuals that you get in your mind when you're reading. And I appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Tim, thank you. As always.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to ask questions.
And James, as always, our tech guy.
Anytime.
Yeah, so I don't know, Alicia, I'll ask. I can ask. Alicia wanted to know if we can do an autographed copy giveaway, but we'll discuss that. I'm not giving mine away. Mine says it's Aaron. Mine says to Aaron, so this is mine. Sorry.
Scratch it out and write someone else's name, whoever wins.
No.
We'll get in touch with Mike and we can figure something out.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Thank you again, and I appreciate it and your time with us, and thank you for rescheduling.
Oh, of course. Well, I didn't have hurricanes.
So. Apologize.
Yeah, so we'll apologize for Mother Nature. But yeah, so next time, episode 3, December, I believe, or November. We're still waiting for confirmation, but Thank you guys for joining, and thank you for having us, and thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.